Well, joining us now is Maurice MacLeod, a Labour councillor in Wandsworth, who is also on the long list to contest Vauxhall if and when there is that next general election. Welcome, Maurice. What's your take on this?
The first question is why? I don't understand why this is even happening. There's no evidence that there's any massive amount of voter fraud going on. I think the Electoral Commission found that in the 2017 election, there was one case out of 44.4 million votes. That's 0.0000063%. It seems like you're solving a problem that doesn't exist.
Although one might argue perhaps there is fraud going on, but it isn't necessarily always being reported or picked up on, and this is a way that you would, stop that from happening.
Yeah, it totally feels like solving. And if you think that the cost of this is going to be £20 million for each election. And this is without even getting into how this will suppress voter turnout and exactly the sort of people that we need to be more engaged with our politics. At the moment, there's a democratic deficit where poorer people from minority communities, and even in some cases women, are less likely to vote. And you're going to bring in something that is shown, if you look at the states, it's shown to suppress voter turnout. It seems bizarre. I don't want to be critical, but it seems like it's a deliberate suppression act.
And I suppose the answer to that would be the idea of a national identity card. I mean, what would be your feeling on that?
I'm not particularly in love with the idea of a national ID card, but we don't have a culture of that here. That's the other thing. So when people say, oh, this happens in some European countries or other places you have to turn up with your voter ID to vote, we don't have a culture of walking around with ID cards. As 11 million people don't have any form of passport or driving licence. 3.5 million people don't have.
I suppose the answer to that would be it would help with that, wouldn't it? Having ID cards, they have them in Germany.
Well, there's certain irony in introducing this discussion by saying let's be more in line with European countries after our previous discussion on Brexit. But anyway, put that on one side. I mean, I totally agree with Maurice. It's completely unnecessary. There's not the slightest evidence that voter fraud takes place at polling stations. Where it does take place, as the Conservative councillor from Tower Hamlets pointed out, is in postal voting and proxy voting. Much easier to cheat the system. So if you create barriers to people going to polling stations, they will do postal voting and proxy voting instead. It's completely counterproductive, unnecessary, and this is, I think this is bureaucracy run riot.
Yeah. Paul, bureaucracy run riot. You don't like bureaucracy.
I don't like bureaucracy, but this is something that there was one proven example of impersonation. There's a lot more reporting of it, though, around the country, and it is difficult to actually get to the stage when you're proving it and taking it to court. But nonetheless, the Labour Party introduced photo IDs for voters in Northern Ireland in 2003. That's been found to be working fine. There's no examples of personation in Northern Ireland since then. I understand the worry and the concern about having people that have no passports or driving licences, but we've had a lot of pilots in different places, including Bromley, and where it's going to be rolled out, the council will work to give you voter ID, so a specific voter ID.
As opposed to a general ID card.
You don't need a driving licence, you don't need a passport and these kind of things, so it won't disadvantage.
So broadly, you're in favour, basically?
Yeah, so it works in Northern Ireland, it works in many, many other countries. Election observers that have come to the UK to look at our elections have called for a sense that we have voter ID.
OK, Dawn.
So what shocks me about this is when I read the United Nations report on the rise of the far-right and nationalist populist governments, it talked about tactics that they use to suppress voters and people going to vote. And one of the tactics that they use is exactly this, bring in ID to vote. And it's a tactic that's used around the world. And the UN has actually stipulated that in their report. And that quite shocked me, that we've got a government that's actually doing this.
That was fine.
Doing this in...
That wasn't suppression in Northern Ireland, it suddenly... But
doing this in this way.
UK.
And you talk about the pilots, Paul, that have been happening around the country. Well, the pilots haven't really proved to being successful, and they've shown that there's been thousands of people that were prevented from voting, and those people, as Maurice has said, no, there was almost 1,000. Yeah. And the people that Maurice talked about earlier that we need to engage in democracy are being disengaged, and actually that does nothing for our democracy.
I think it's 360 that actually didn't have ID that didn't come back. That was
740 this year, 350 last year. So 2,000 people were sent home with no ID. 740 of them didn't bother coming back.
Yeah.
Okay.
That doesn't mean they were frauding. That means
No, exactly.
They just
Which is why we've got to
didn't
supply them
happen to
that
have
voter
ID on
ID
that
and make
day.
that awareness right when we're rolling it out.
Okay.